quick intro for you, Kylie, in terms of your credentials. So Kylie has been wrangling words for over 25 years as a former journalist, practicing marketer, and now as a speculative fiction author. She has self-published a young adult fantasy series and other books under her own imprint, Lorikeet Inc. Kylie's creative writing has been recognised by several awards and programs, including longlisting twice for the Queensland Writers' Centre Adaptable Competition and shortlisting and wins in the Queensland Writers' Centre's Flash Fiction, the Australian Writers' Centre Furious Fiction and GenreCon's Short Story Competition, and several leading anthologies. So, yeah, again, well done on those successes there, Kylie.
Very special as well.
So
you should count the number of times you call me special.
So, Kylie, maybe a good place to start is tell us, how did you get into, given your qualifications as a former journalist and experience in marketing, how did you break into writing fiction? Is this something you've been doing for a long time, or is it a more recent thing? Tell us your story into writing fiction.
Look, I don't think my origin story is unique when it comes to writers. I was one of those kids who all I ever wanted to do was write a book, and I certainly wrote lots of stories when I was a kid, and always had a book in my hand and also a notepad and lots of writing stories. But I realized at some point that how do you make when you're 17, you're looking, okay, what I'm going to study at uni, and I just thought, okay, well, I'll go into journalism because that's writing. So I went into journalism and then led to marketing communication, but I still never, in the back of my mind, I wasn't doing any creative writing, and I just kind of was waiting. I just waiting for, what's this idea? What is the idea for a book? And I think I kind of, for me, I think it was a matter of giving myself permission to actually go, you know what, you can just do this. You don't have to wait for a big sign. You don't have to wait to have all this spare time. You don't have to wait for anything, just do it. And so I think I started writing creatively again, 2006, I think I started my first novel. And yeah, that was where I started.
Did you mainly read fantasy fiction? Was that your preference in reading, and hence why you went into that as your writing?
I definitely have always lent to anything that had some form of magic in it. So the books that I read when I was little, I remember reading Arthurian, like King Arthur kind of story. Enid Blyton, I like every single one of her fairy stories, Faraway Tree. And I think that it's had like a little bit of magic. So I always was attracted to the idea of that. And I didn't set out necessarily to write fantasy, but that's where I ended up. And I love it. Any form of fantasy. Like I do write other kind of short stories, and I have got a couple of other manuscripts that are, lean more towards women's fiction, but there's still magic in them. There always has to be magic as far as I'm concerned.
And I just got to ask the question, how did you grapple with the issue of, you're a professional person, sort of making it known to the world that you're writing fantasy fiction? Was that an issue for you in terms of kind of wanting to keep it secret, or were there any reservations and sort of coming out saying like, hey, look, this is what I'm doing? And what was the response when your work colleagues or friends found out what you were doing?
I think I'm just trying to think back. I never really started talking about it till I actually thought I had something. So I did just chip away at it for some time, and that first manuscript, which I started in 2006, I worked on and off for that manuscript like probably nearly 10 years, doing my own little apprenticeship and, going to courses, just fine-tuning, learning, fine-tuning, getting feedback, all those things. And it wasn't probably till I didn't start taking things really seriously till about 2017. And that's when I was ready to pitch it. And by the time when I actually knew I had a product I could pitch, that's when I started telling people. And I had no issue with professionally blurring the lines or anything. It was just more that it's just that intangible thing of, is this something I'm just like stuffing about with, or is it actually got something? So yeah,
I guess there's that question.
Everyone's very supportive.
Oh, yeah, that's great, and that's been our experience as well. You know, the people that are supportive, and Harry and I both talked about how, because of our professional backgrounds, police and paramedic, that we both had reservations, and I guess that's why I asked that question. You know, we had those reservations about coming out. So look, we're writing fiction, but I know my experience, certainly. You might comment as well, Harry. My experiences were people were overly supportive, and I had no reason to be fearful of sort of coming out and telling the world that I'm writing fiction.
I still have a little bit of angst
Mm.
because I'm still working as a paramedic, and my fictional setting is still Brisbane, and the fictional ambulance service by default reflects on the existing ambulance service because there is only one. And so that where I do still have a little bit of concerns, but as I say, as I've said in the past, I think the horse is bolted by the since I've been publishing since 2016. If they wanted to do something about what I was saying, they probably should have done it a little bit earlier.
Okay, let's not tell anyone else about it. Hopefully they're not listening. Kylie, I really like what you said about when I asked the question about when did you start writing, and you just kind of said, look, just started writing. You've got to start. I think a lot of us as writers, we spend a lot of time talking about writing, but at some point you just got to knuckle down and write, don't you?
Yeah, it's so easy. It doesn't matter what you write. It's easier to work with something once you have words on a page.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter what
Absolutely.
those words on a page look like. It's way easier. So yeah, I think I don't know. I want to say a controversial thing. I'm not sure if writer's block is necessarily a thing, because you can always write something to get you through a block. You may not be able to fix the exact thing you want to fix right then, but I feel like the only way to, it's like flexing any muscle. The only way to do it is to do it.
Yes, I agree. I mean, that's something we've mentioned in the past. It's like you can't edit a blank page. You can edit a load of rubbish, and fix it. May even have to bin it, but at least it's flexing. It's getting those muscles working and getting sort of stuff down on the page.
But at least a page of rubbish is progress. That's still better
That's
than a
true.
blank page, isn't it? Hey, Harry, I'll hand over to you. You've actually, now this is I know again we're coming over audio, but we will do a little video snip of this. You've made an observation with Kylie's.
Oh, well, I was saving that one
background.
just in case conversations sort of dulled and I'd so how OCD are you? Just to explain both that people, and I've got a book shelf behind me, and it's just anything and it's all over the place. However, Kylie's bookshelf is color coordinated, so all of the books are lined up in beautiful sort of like a lineup of different colors that are all sort of going in the rainbow color. So we were all very impressed with that, and I thought it took OCD to another level. But any particular reason for it other than it looks pretty?
Look, there is a reason. I had to start doing TikTok videos as part of my socials, and to be honest, I haven't really stuck with that. It's not my preferred platform.
Yeah.
Whether it's great for anyone else, it's just not great for me. But I needed a background, and I was like, yeah, I've seen these rainbow bookshelves, and they are beautiful. They are controversial because there's whole series of books up there, and the series is split because if they're different colors.
Yeah, of course.
So, but the other thing is I'm a very visual person. Like if I see something, particularly if I see words, but also colors, it imprints some kind of memory for me. So I actually can find a book because I remember the color of the cover.
Yeah.
So for me, it works to me.
You get screwed over by those ones which have a different colored spine though. So
yes. Yeah, so Harry Potter's split over different shelves.
Yeah.
Some Bridgerton books are split over different shelves.
Actually, I've got a question that relates to book covers. I was going to ask it later, but now's probably a good time to segue into it now that we're talking about covers, particularly for writing for fantasy books. Now, you've got some wonderful covers for your books, which we'll talk about very shortly. But in terms of how you visualize the design, obviously, I'm assuming you work with a cover designer. Is that correct? You have a cover designer that...
Yeah, I have got a professional cover designer, and she also happens to be an author, which helps because if you've got some money you can spare on a professional cover designer, I always recommend it. And obviously you've only got what you can spend, but if you can afford someone who does book covers, who's not just a regular designer, but who regularly does book covers, it's a huge benefit because it is a different medium to designing a flyer or a poster, because and so that helps. Her name's Jo Edgar Baker, and she's amazing. Anyway, Jo does these covers for me, but because I've got a marketing background, what I do is I write a brief for her, and that brief can be just, sometimes I just put together a PowerPoint with really roughly, and I will find a whole bunch of images I like, or I even create like a board in like a stock photo site like iStock, and I'll just go through there and create a board of any photos that inspire me. So I just click them, add them to the board, and then I also will find book covers that I like elements of in my genre, and I will put those covers, like just snips of those covers, into the same PowerPoint with any specific instructions. So she then has an idea of, she very rarely uses the exact images, but she's coming to it from the point of view of a designer, but she knows what where my thinking's at, because so we often she nails my covers usually within 1 to 2 rounds of changes.
Nice. And you find that usually is in sync with what you'd visualized?
Yeah. So I usually have a fairly clear image like of what I want, because, and this is really important, you should go into bookshops and look at books in your genre, particularly recent books. And you can also search for book covers online on Amazon and stuff as well. But you want to see what's on trend. So, for example, in the fantasy kind of my YA fantasy series, when I designed those, just single symbols were quite popular. So if you think of like Hunger Games symbol of the Mockingjay, if you think about the latest version of the Twilight that have come out, the Twilight books, it's just a single kind of symbol on the front, rather than it being a character, or rather than it being, so you really want to focus on what's on trend for this genre, and it's completely within the realms of possibilities that you might want to revise your cover like a few years down the track to keep up with trends, because it's like any fashion, and even the colors they choose. So, and the fonts, even the fonts are like, there's definitely trends that a book cover designer would be across that you may not be, but do your research, check them out and choose what you like. So, yeah.
And is there a distinct difference? Obviously, with the genre of fantasy, and we talk about the importance of the book cover to capture the reader, to give them a clear message as to what to expect from the book. Are you saying there's even a clear distinction between, say, adult fantasy books and YA fantasy books, or is it a bit of a blurring, or would you say it's quite distinctly different in terms of the cover design?
In fantasy, it's quite a weird. It's kind of an odd one, because a lot of YA fantasy clearly are read by adults, so you're not necessarily trying to appeal to a 15-year-old. But yes, there is a difference in what you would put on the cover, and it comes down to what signals are you trying to tell the reader. So my more recent series, which isn't YA necessarily, even though the character's of that age, the signals I wanted to send the reader was it's set in the Victorian England period. So we used silhouettes of people, like small little silhouettes of them, like and kind of borders around that were kind of flowery and like Victorian wallpaper. So you just want to, it's more about capturing, I guess, what the story is. So a reader doesn't pick it up and go, this isn't what was on the packet. what was advertised. So, yep.
Okay, well, let's move on to the works that you've published. You've contributed or written short stories. You've done novels or novellas. So what, in terms of your published work, what came first? Did you embark on short stories first in terms of what you published, or was it your novellas / novels?
My first published work was actually a short story. So while I was still chipping away at my novels, and I was probably getting pretty close to, probably only a couple of years out before I published my novel, that I actually started actively entering short story competitions. And me personally, I try to target short story competitions where, not necessarily about the money, but the output being the shortlisted stories get to go in an anthology, because it's a way of getting published. And like often with these anthologies, you may not get paid and you may never see a cent. or you might win a small monetary prize, but it's more about the fact that your words are getting out there in a published space. So yeah, I entered a couple of competitions which was successful, and appeared in a couple of anthologies, and that was also some validation, because it wasn't me saying, hey, I'm just going to publish a book. It was someone else saying, yeah. And again, short stories are fantastic for just flexing that writing muscle.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I think I'm trying to remember who it was that was saying that we had on as a guest, that was saying that practice or put out short stories, because that's definitely a way to go, because you have to hone down your story to the vital parts and make sure that it's punchy and gets it told really quickly.
Yeah, it's definitely a skill to have. And yeah, I totally recommend it. And what I also love about short stories and even flash fiction, sometimes you can scratch an itch for something. You're like, you know what? I've always wanted to write a steampunk story, but I'm just not interested in doing like a whole novel.
Yeah.
Yeah. So sometimes you can find yourself just delving into like a what if or a particular genre that you normally wouldn't do, just for fun.
Absolutely.
And let's have it quickly talk about your books. So you've got 2 series. So I checked the pronunciation before.
Have you already forgotten?
I've forgotten the Cyprian prophecies, the Cyprian prophecies, and that's a series, and also the Fae of the Crystal Palace series. Can you tell us a little bit about your 2 series?
Yeah. So the Cyprian prophecy series is the young adult fantasy series, and I kind of compare it to a PG rated Game of Thrones or M rated. It's just not R rated. So,
Gotcha.
so it's lots of fight for thrones and power, but it's actually more driven by a main character who's there's a male and a female main character, but if you chose one, it would be a young girl who's trying to find her way in the world, and ends up thrown into there's magic, but she also gets thrown into her enemies, has to go live among the enemy at their court. So and it just goes from there. So it's an epic fantasy. It goes over 5 full-length novels. And yeah, so that's that series. Do you want to know about the other one?
Yeah, sure. Tell us about the
Yes,
second
please.
series.
Sorry. And Fae of the Crystal Palace. I did a little bit of a pivot. It's still fantasy, but I wanted to do a romantic fantasy, and I just wanted to dial up the romance a little bit, and I also wanted to appeal to a little bit more of I didn't want to necessarily appeal to an older audience, but I know there's a large audience of adult romance readers out there, and I kind of thought this would be something that I would enjoy writing, but also there's probably a big market out there for it. So my writing comes first, but if there's a big market, that's a bonus.
Yeah.
So yeah, I knew there was a trend out there for particularly what's called gas lamp fantasy. So not gaslight, it's gas lamp. So if you think Victorian, Regency period, anything that there were gas lamps. So there may not be steampunk, but it could be steampunk, but it's that kind of period. And I love the Regency period. I'm a massive Jane Austen fan, but also I love Victorian England. I'm a massive historical England is like my bag. I've always read like stuff from Tudor England, anything. Love it. And so I decided the Victorian England I was going to do, and I definitely wanted magic, and I knew I wanted fae, because I've just been obsessed with reading about fae or fairies in recent years, and they are hot. Like, they are the vampires of 2024. They're just they're hot and literally hot. They're always actually very good looking. So,
I do have to burst your bubble about England, though. There's nothing magic about the weather. It's cold and wet, and very dreary. There's no magic there, unfortunately.
I lived in London for a year and I loved it.
Yeah, briefly, yes. You can deal with London briefly, but going on the tube, rush hour, oh my God, there's just way too many people. I did have a serious question, though. I noticed that you have your own imprint. What does that actually mean? As in, are you a self-publisher, or have you actually set up your own printing press or whatever, or how does that go?
Yeah, so essentially means I'm self-published or independently published, and I have published other books, anthologies with other writers under that imprint. So
Right.
it is really it's primarily for my own purposes. I'm not seeking submissions from other authors, but if a project strikes me or a collaboration with someone, I'll certainly use it. What it meant for me was I went through the whole trying to get traditionally published. So I went through the whole pitching process, got incredibly close a couple of times, but people loved what I wrote, just not the right thing for the right time at that exact moment.
Yeah.
And that's okay. And I kind of exhausted my target publishers and agents, I suppose, and just was like, okay, well, I'm a person who likes knowing how things work. I'm a bit of a control freak. It really appealed to me, the idea of being able to do it myself. And so setting up your own imprint or publishing thing is actually not complicated. Like you just need a business name, a logo to put on the spine of a book. You could do it as a sole trader. Other than that, you're just setting up a business. That is all that means. But the mechanics of actually publishing a book, that's what you have to learn.
Yeah. I mean, I was obviously Jack's got his publisher that publishes his books, Hawkeye, but I'm a self-publisher, but I don't know whether I've ever called it an imprint, but because my actual company is Harry Colfer Books. So I wasn't, it took me a long time to come up with that name. But the idea is that it can be shortened to HCB at a future, and then come up with a more natty logo and the like. But I was just interested in the way you were referring to it as your own imprint, as a self-published author. I guess most self-published authors are going to be having their own imprint to a certain extent, aren't they?
This is right. And look, because I come from a marketing background, you could say it's spin. It is spin.
It is spin, yeah.
I'm trying to position myself for the world. So I wanted someone to be able to pick up my book and go, it's indistinguishable from a traditional published book.
Yeah.
So that's why I really wanted the logo, and I didn't want it to be my name, because I want, when people see on the listing on Amazon, that it says, oh, Laura Keating. And some people never connect the dots that it's me, which I think it's really good for personal positioning.
Yes.
I'm not lying.
I should have thought of it. God damn it.
You still can. HC. I like the abbreviation, sounds good. Get yourself a logo.
Yeah.